I was 29 years old when I stood in our empty barn, holding a letter that made my hands shake so badly I could barely read the words. My husband had been gone for 3 days before I found it. But that wasn't even the worst part. The letter wasn't written by him. I kept that secret buried for 11 years, and I'm only telling it now because my daughter deserves to know the truth about why her father left, and why I let everyone believe it was my fault. You need to understand something before I tell you what really happened. In our community, a wife doesn't question her husband's choices. She prays. She waits. She trusts that God's will is working through him, even when it feels like her heart is being torn from her chest. I did all of those things, and it almost destroyed me. I grew up in a small Amish settlement in northern Indiana, the kind of place where everyone knows whose horse is tied outside whose house and for how long. My mother was a quiet woman who expressed love through warm bread and neatly pressed dresses left on my bed. My father was a deacon in the church, stern, respected, a man who believed rules existed to protect souls from eternal damnation. I was their fourth daughter, the one who asked too many questions and spent too much time reading by candlelight when I should have been sleeping. Curiosity is a dangerous thing for a woman, my father told me once. I was 12. I had asked why the ministers could interpret scripture, but my mother couldn't even discuss it at the family table. I learned to keep my questions inside, but I never stopped asking them. By the time I turned 18, I had accepted that my life would follow the path expected of me. Baptism, marriage, children, a home filled with the smell of baking and the sound of German hymns sung while washing dishes. His name was Samuel, and he came to our community in the spring of my 19th year. He was 24, broad-shouldered and quiet, with hands that looked like they had known hard work since childhood. His family had moved from a settlement in Pennsylvania, something about his father inheriting land from a deceased uncle. They arrived during the muddy season, when the roads were nearly impassable and everyone was tired of winter, but spring hadn't quite committed to arriving. I remember the first time I saw him at a youth singing. He stood near the back of the barn, not singing, just watching. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. Most Amish men would have. It would have been proper. He held my gaze for 3 full seconds, and I felt something shift inside me that I didn't have words for. We started courting 6 months later. He came to my parents' house on Sunday evenings, sat in our living room while my mother served coffee and my father asked careful questions about his intentions, his faith, his ability to provide. Samuel answered every question perfectly. Too perfectly, I understand now. But back then, I thought I had found something rare. "We'll have a good life," he told me one evening, walking me back from a community gathering. His buggy horse walked slowly beside us, breath steaming in the cold air. "I'll build you a house with big windows, so you can see the fields. I know you like watching the sunrise." No one had ever noticed that about me. That was the moment I fell in love with him. We married in November after harvest season, when the community could spare a full day for celebration. 300 people came. The benches were set up in my parents' largest barn, and the smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled every corner. I wore a blue dress that my mother had sewn by hand, every stitch a prayer for my happiness. Samuel stood at the front of the congregation, and when the bishop asked him if he accepted me as his wife before God, his voice didn't waver. "I do," 2 words, spoken clearly, witnessed by everyone I had ever known. I built my entire future on those 2 words. Our first year was beautiful. Hard, the way Amish life is always hard, but beautiful. We lived in a small house on land his father had given him, 60 acres of good soil, a barn that needed repairs, a garden plot that I planted with tomatoes and green beans and marigolds along the edges. Samuel worked from sunrise to sunset. He fixed the barn roof, cleared the backfield, built furniture for our home with his own hands. At night, we sat together in the living room, too tired to talk much, but comfortable in the silence. I thought we were happy. I truly did. The first time I noticed something wrong was 14 months into our marriage. Samuel had gone into town to sell produce at the English market, something he did every Saturday during growing season. He left before dawn, same as always. He should have been back by mid-afternoon. He didn't return until after dark. I was standing on the porch when his buggy finally pulled into the drive. I had been praying, my hands clenched so tight around my apron that my fingers ached. In our community, accidents happened. Horses spooked. Buggies overturned. Every wife knew the fear of waiting. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I was so worried. He climbed down from the buggy slowly, like his body weighed more than it should. In the lantern light, his face looked hollow. "I got delayed," he said. That was all. He walked past me into the house, and I stood there in the cold, trying to understand why those 3 words felt like a door closing. That night, he didn't eat dinner. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at something in his hands, a piece of paper folded small. When I walked near, he tucked it into his pocket. "What's that?" I asked. "Nothing." I wanted to push. Every instinct told me to push, but I was a good Amish wife. A good Amish wife trusts her husband. A good Amish wife doesn't demand answers. So I went to bed alone, and I lay in the darkness, listening to him sit at that table until almost midnight. I didn't sleep at all. The paper came again and again. Every few weeks, Samuel would return from town with that same hollow look, that same folded paper hidden in his pocket. He started taking longer trips, overnight trips. He told me he was helping a farmer 2 counties over with some construction work. "He pays well," Samuel said. "We need the money." We didn't need the money. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough. Our garden produced well. His furniture sold at good prices. We had savings. I didn't say any of that. I just nodded and packed him food for the journey. My mother noticed before I said anything. She came to visit one afternoon, and within 10 minutes of sitting at my kitchen table, she set down her coffee cup and looked at me with those eyes that had seen too much of life to be fooled easily. "What's wrong with your husband?" "Nothing," I said. "He's just tired." "I've seen tired. This is something else." I wanted to tell her everything. The late nights. The folded papers. The way Samuel flinched when I touched his shoulder unexpectedly. The growing silence between us that felt like a third person living in our house. But if I spoke the words out loud, they would become real. And I wasn't ready for them to be real. "He's working hard," I said. "That's all." My mother looked at me for a long moment, then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Marriage has seasons," she said. "Some are harder than others, but you have to water the roots even when you can't see the flowers." I nodded like I understood. I didn't understand anything yet. Our daughter was born in our 3rd year of marriage, Hannah. She arrived in early autumn, when the leaves were just starting to turn and the air smelled like wood smoke and harvest. The labor was long, 19 hours, and the midwife told me later there had been a moment when things could have gone very wrong. Hannah came into the world screaming, red-faced and furious and absolutely perfect. When Samuel held her for the first time, something cracked open in his expression. I saw it happen. For just a moment, whatever weight he had been carrying seemed to lift. He looked at our daughter with an expression of pure, terrified love. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She looks like you." I cried. Of course I cried. Hormones and exhaustion and the overwhelming relief of holding this tiny person who had been growing inside me for 9 months. For a few weeks, everything was better. Samuel stayed home. He held Hannah while I slept. He sang German lullabies to her in the middle of the night, his deep voice rumbling through the quiet house. He built her a cradle with his own hands, sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk. I started to believe that whatever had been wrong had passed. That fatherhood had healed something in him. I was so desperate to believe that. The letters started coming directly to our house 6 months after Hannah was born. They arrived in plain white envelopes, no return address, just Samuel's name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Neat, precise, feminine. The first time I saw one, I brought it to him like a good wife should. "This came for you." Samuel glanced at the envelope and his face went pale. He took it from my hand quickly, too quickly, and shoved it into his pocket. "Probably from the lumber supplier," he said. The lumber supplier had never written to us before. All their business was done in person at the yard with cash. I didn't say that. A week later, another letter. Same handwriting, same lack of return address. This time, I didn't give it to him. I hid it in my sewing basket, tucked beneath a stack of fabric scraps. I told myself I would confront him about it. I told myself I had a right to know. But hours passed, and I didn't open it. Days passed, and I didn't confront him. The letter sat in my sewing basket like a coiled snake, and I was too afraid to touch it. What kind of wife hides things from her husband? What kind of wife doesn't trust the man she married before God and 300 witnesses? A wife who knows something is wrong but isn't ready to find out what. The day everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday. Samuel left early to help with a barn raising at the Yoder farm 3 miles east. Hannah was teething and fussy, so I spent the morning walking her around the house, singing whatever songs came to mind, praying she would finally fall asleep. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My mother usually came on Thursdays. The neighbors were all at the barn raising. When I opened the door, a woman was standing on my porch. She was English. Probably early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. She wore jeans and a plain gray sweater, and she was clutching a manila envelope against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Are you Samuel's wife?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse. Yes," I said slowly. "Can I help you?" She looked at Hannah, who had finally fallen asleep against my shoulder. Something flickered across her face. Pain. Longing, something I couldn't name. "My name is Rebecca," she said. "I think we need to talk." I should have told her to leave. I should have closed the door and waited for my husband to come home and demanded he explain why an English woman was standing on our porch saying his name like she knew him. But the letter was still in my sewing basket. The questions were still burning in my chest. And this woman was looking at me with something that might have been pity. I let her in. We sat at my kitchen table, the table Samuel had built with his own hands, and she placed the envelope between us. "I've been trying to reach Samuel for months," she said. "I wrote letters, he never responded, so I had to come." "Who are you?" I asked. She took a breath, steadied herself. "I'm his wife." The words didn't make sense. They arrived at my ears, but my brain refused to process them. "That's not possible," I said. "I'm his wife." "No," her voice was gentle, too gentle. The kind of gentle you use when you're telling someone their whole life is about to shatter. "You're the woman he married after he left me." She told me everything. His real name wasn't Samuel, it was David. David Michael Carson. He wasn't Amish, he had never been Amish. 7 years before he came to our community, he had married Rebecca in a small town in Ohio. They had a daughter together. Her name was Emily. She was 6 years old. "He was a good father," Rebecca said, and her voice cracked. "A good husband. I don't know what happened. One day he went to work and never came home. I filed a missing persons report. I searched for him for years." She pulled a photograph from the envelope. A family portrait. A man who was unmistakably my husband. Younger, clean-shaven, wearing English clothes and a smile I had never seen before, stood with his arm around this woman. Between them, a little girl with dark curls grinned at the camera. "I thought he was dead," Rebecca whispered. "For 3 years I thought my husband was dead." The baby shifted in my arms. "Hannah, our daughter, the daughter of a man who didn't exist." "How did you find him?" I asked. "My cousin lives in the next county over. She saw him at a market, recognized him from the old photos. It took me another year to track down where he was living." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry you got caught in this." I pulled my hand away. I didn't want her pity. I didn't want her apologies. I wanted to rewind time to this morning, when my husband was still my husband and my life was still my life. "Where is he now?" I asked. "At the barn raising. I saw him leave this morning. That's how I knew it was safe to come." Safe. My husband was a man another woman needed to feel safe from. Rebecca left an hour later. She gave me her phone number, written on a scrap of paper. She told me she was staying at a motel in town for the next 2 days. "Do what you need to do," she said. "I'm not here to destroy your life, I needed answers, and I thought you deserved them too." I watched her car disappear down our gravel drive. Then I went back inside, laid Hannah in her cradle, and opened my sewing basket. The letter was still there. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was the same as the envelopes. Neat, precise, feminine. "David, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know you've built a new life and you want to leave the old one behind. But Emily asks about you every day. She's starting to forget what you look like. Please, I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking you to tell your daughter goodbye. She deserves that much. I'm running out of money. I'm running out of time. If you don't respond to this letter, I'm going to have to come find you myself. Please don't make me do that. Rebecca. The letter was dated 4 months ago. He had known she was coming. He had known this entire time. Samuel or David, or whatever his name was, didn't come home that night. I sat in the dark living room, Hannah asleep in my arms, and waited. Every creak of the house made my heart stop. Every gust of wind sounded like buggy wheels on gravel. He never came. The next morning, I walked to the barn to start my chores. The sun was barely up, painting the frost on the grass in shades of pink and gold. A beautiful morning. The kind of morning that doesn't care that your life has fallen apart. The barn was empty. His horse was gone. His tools were gone. A few of his clothes were missing from the hooks where he kept them. On the workbench, propped against a can of nails, was a letter. It wasn't from Rebecca this time. It was from him. I know she came. I know you know. I can't explain. Not in a way that would make sense. Not in a way that would make this right. I'm not the man you thought I was. I'm not the man I wanted to be. When I came here, I wasn't running from the law or from debts or from anything you're probably imagining. I was running from myself. David Carson was a man who failed his family. He lost his job. He couldn't provide. He made choices that hurt the people who loved him. He was weak and scared and ashamed. When I left Ohio, I told myself David was dead. I told myself I could become someone new, someone better. And for a while, I believed it. You made me believe it. I loved you. I need you to know that. Everything I felt for you was real. Hannah was real. This life was real. I didn't come here looking for a wife. I came here looking for a place to disappear. Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I never deserved it. But the past doesn't stay buried. I know that now. Tell Hannah? The sentence stopped there. The pen had pressed hard into the paper, leaving a deep groove, but no more words followed. He couldn't even finish the sentence about his own daughter. The community found out, of course. They always do. By the end of the week, everyone knew that my husband wasn't who he claimed to be, that our marriage was built on a lie, that I had been living with a stranger for 4 years. Some people were kind. The Yoders brought casseroles. The Miller sisters offered to help with Hannah so I could rest. My mother came every day, even though I could see the shame burning in her eyes. Shame not at me, at him. At the English world that had somehow invaded our peaceful community and torn her daughter's life apart. But not everyone was kind. He lied about his baptism. I heard one woman whisper at a church gathering, "Their marriage isn't valid. Their daughter is illegitimate." The bishop should have investigated him before accepting him into the church. She should have known something was wrong. A wife knows. I stopped going to church gatherings. I stopped going anywhere except the grocery store and my parents' house. I became a ghost in my own life. The bishop came to visit 3 weeks after Samuel disappeared. Bishop Eicher was an old man with a long white beard and eyes that had seen too much sin to be surprised by any of it. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Rebecca had sat and dismantled my entire existence, and folded his hands. "The community is struggling with this," he said. I almost laughed. The community was struggling. "I've been praying about what to do," he continued. "About your situation." My situation. You're not technically married. The man who called himself Samuel was never baptized into our faith. He deceived the congregation. The marriage vows you exchanged are not binding in the eyes of the church. I stared at him. "What about in the eyes of God?" I asked. He didn't answer that. "Your daughter," he said carefully. "There will be questions about her standing in the community. Children born outside of marriage? Don't." My voice came out harder than I intended. "Don't talk about my daughter like she's a problem to be solved." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll do what I can to protect her," he said. "And you. But you need to understand, some in the congregation will not accept this easily. They'll say you should have known. They'll say it was my fault." He didn't deny it. The years that followed were the hardest of my life. I stayed in the community because I had nowhere else to go. My parents helped with Hannah while I worked, cleaning houses, taking in sewing, doing whatever I could to keep food on the table. The church allowed us to remain, but there was always a distance now. A hesitation, like I was carrying something contagious. Hannah grew up without a father. She asked about him constantly when she was young, and I never knew what to say. He left, I told her. He had to leave. Why? She would ask. Because he was hurting, and sometimes people who are hurting don't know how to stay. She deserved more than that. She deserved the truth. But how do you tell a child that her father was a ghost? That the man who held her as a baby was living a lie so complete that even he didn't know where the falsehood ended and the truth began? I kept Rebecca's phone number for 11 years. I never called it. Last spring, a letter arrived at my house. This time, the handwriting was unfamiliar. The postmark was from Ohio. Inside was a single photograph and a short note. The photograph showed a man I barely recognized. Older, gray at the temples, sitting in a wheelchair on a porch I had never seen. Beside him stood Rebecca and a teenage girl with dark curls, Emily, all grown up. The note read, "He has cancer. The doctors say he has maybe 3 months. He asked me to send this. He wanted you to know that he never stopped thinking about you, about Hannah. He said he doesn't deserve forgiveness, but he wanted you to know he was sorry. He was always sorry. I forgive him. I don't know why, but I do. I hope someday you can too. Rebecca." I sat with that letter for 3 weeks before I showed it to Hannah. She's 15 now, tall and serious and so much smarter than I was at her age. She read the letter twice, then set it down on the kitchen table. "He wants you to forgive him," she said. "I know. Are you going to?" I looked at my daughter, at her steady eyes and her steady heart and her refusal to accept easy answers. "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "He took so much from us. He gave me you." I started crying. I couldn't help it. All these years, I thought I had failed her. I thought I had given her nothing but a broken family and a community that whispered behind our backs. But she was looking at me like I was enough. Maybe I was. Samuel, David, died 2 months later. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't send flowers. I didn't respond to Rebecca's letter. But I kept the photograph. It's in my nightstand drawer now, beneath a stack of old letters and the dried flowers from my wedding day. I don't look at it often, but knowing it's there helps somehow. Proof that he existed. Proof that it all really happened. Proof that I survived it. I lost the only home I had ever known the day that English woman knocked on my door. I lost my husband, my reputation, my certainty about who I was and what my life meant, but I didn't lose myself. It took 11 years to understand that. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just breaks everything you thought was solid and leaves you standing in the rubble, trying to figure out what's worth rebuilding. But you rebuild anyway. For Hannah. For yourself. For the woman you're still becoming, even when you thought you were finished. I'm still rebuilding. I think I always will be. The community never fully accepted us back, but some wounds are too deep for a casserole to heal. Hannah is planning her own baptism now, and when she stands before the congregation, she'll do it knowing exactly who she is and where she comes from. No lies, no hidden letters, no secrets waiting to destroy everything. That's the gift I gave her, I suppose. The truth, no matter how painful, is lighter than a lie carried for 11 years. I know that now. Some nights I still dream about him. Not the man he really was, David Carson from Ohio with his failed job and his abandoned family and his mountain of shame. I dream about Samuel, the man I married. The man who built our daughter's cradle with his own hands and sang German lullabies in the dark. That man existed too, even if he was built on a foundation of sand. I've stopped trying to separate the real from the imagined. Both versions of him were true. Both versions of him loved me in their own broken way. And both versions of him left. Rebecca still writes sometimes, not often, once a year, maybe around Christmas. She sends updates about Emily, who's in college now studying to become a social worker. She wants to help families, Rebecca wrote in her last letter. She says she learned from watching her mother survive something impossible. I've never written back. I don't know what I would say. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for destroying my life so I could build a better one. Both would be true. Neither feels adequate. But I keep her letters too, in the same drawer as the photograph and the dried flowers, and the scraps of a life I thought I was building. The bishop who told me my marriage wasn't valid died 3 winters ago. I went to his funeral. I sat in the back row of the church and listened to people talk about his wisdom and his kindness and his decades of faithful service. No one mentioned the young wife he couldn't protect. No one mentioned the daughter he called illegitimate. Funerals are for the living, I suppose, and the living prefer comfortable stories. I stayed for the meal afterward and ate my casserole in silence and left before anyone could decide whether to speak to me or not. Hannah asked me once if I would ever marry again. She was 14, and we were canning tomatoes in the kitchen, and she asked it the way she asks everything, directly, without flinching. No, I said, and I was surprised by how certain I sounded. But don't you get lonely? I thought about it while I sealed another jar. The truth is, I do get lonely. Sometimes the silence in this house feels like it has weight, like it's pressing down on my shoulders while I'm trying to sleep. But I've learned that being alone is different from being lonely. And I'd rather be alone with the truth than share my life with another lie. There's a young widow in our community now, Miriam Yoder. Her husband died last year in a farming accident. A tractor rolled over on him in the back field. She has 4 children under 10. I've been bringing her meals on Thursdays, the way my mother used to bring meals to families in need when I was a child. We don't talk much. We don't need to. She knows I understand something about being a woman alone in a community built for couples. She knows I survived it. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what my pain was for. So I could sit in Miriam's kitchen and hold her baby while she cries, and she doesn't have to explain anything. I'm 40 years old now. Older than my mother was when she first noticed something wrong with Samuel. Older than Rebecca was when she showed up on my porch with her manila envelope and her exhausted eyes. I've lived more years without a husband than I ever lived with one. The girl who stood in that barn holding a letter from a stranger doesn't exist anymore. She's been worn down and rebuilt so many times that I barely recognize her, but I carry her with me. I carry all the versions of myself: the curious 12-year-old, the hopeful bride, the shattered wife, the struggling mother, the woman learning to stand alone. Here's what I know now that I didn't know then. Forgiveness isn't something you give to the person who hurt you. It's something you give to yourself. David, Samuel, whoever he really was, he's been dead for years now. My forgiveness doesn't reach him anymore. But my anger was reaching me. It was reaching Hannah. It was seeping into everything I touched like dye from a wet dress, coloring every moment with bitterness I couldn't wash out. Letting go of that anger didn't happen all at once. It happened in pieces. A little bit every time Hannah smiled. A little bit every time I planted marigolds in the garden. A little bit every time I chose to stay soft instead of hard. Last month I did something I never thought I would do. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table Samuel built, the same table where Rebecca told me the truth, the same table where Bishop Eicher told me my marriage wasn't valid, and I wrote a letter to Emily. Not to Rebecca, to the daughter. The girl who was 6 years old when her father disappeared. The girl who grew up without answers the same way Hannah grew up without a father. I told her about Samuel, not David, Samuel. I told her about the man who built furniture with his own hands and sang German lullabies and held his newborn daughter like she was made of glass. I told her that her father wasn't a monster. He was a broken man who made terrible choices, but those choices didn't erase the good that existed in him. The good was real. The love was real. It was just buried under so much fear and shame that he couldn't find his way back to it. I told her that Hannah and I survived, that we built a life from the wreckage he left behind, that we're okay. That she, Emily, deserves to be okay too. I don't know if she'll write back. I don't know if she wants to hear from the woman her father chose over her mother. But I wanted her to know that someone else in this world carries her father's memory with compassion instead of hatred. The envelope is addressed and stamped and sitting on my kitchen table right now. I'll walk it to the mailbox tomorrow morning. I've been staring at it for 3 days, the same way I stared at that first letter hidden in my sewing basket all those years ago. But this letter is different. This letter isn't a secret. This letter isn't a lie. This letter is me, finally telling the truth, not because anyone demanded it, but because I'm ready to tell it. Hannah read it before I sealed the envelope. "It's good," she said. "It's honest." Coming from her, that's the highest praise I could ask for. Tomorrow I'll walk down that gravel drive and open the mailbox and let this letter go. It will travel from Indiana to Ohio, from one woman's survival story to another woman's survival story, and maybe something will heal that hasn't healed yet. Or maybe nothing will happen. Maybe the letter will sit unopened on Emily's kitchen table, the way Rebecca's letters sat unopened in my sewing basket. That's her choice to make. I've done my part. I've told the truth. I've stopped hiding. The girl who was too afraid to open an envelope isn't in charge anymore. I lost the only home I had ever known the day that English woman knocked on my door. I lost my husband, my reputation, my certainty about who I was and what my life meant, but I didn't lose myself. It took 11 years to understand that. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just breaks everything you thought was solid and leaves you standing in the rubble, trying to figure out what's worth rebuilding. But you rebuild anyway. For Hannah. For yourself. For the woman you're still becoming, even when you thought you were finished. I'm still rebuilding. I think I always will be. But for the first time in my life, I finally belong to myself.